Welcome back to Real-ationship Goals, a podcast all about exploring the realities and complexities of healthy relationships. Real-ationship Goals is a project of the Prevention and Education team at the Advocacy Center for Crime Victims and Children in Waco, Texas. If you or someone you know has experienced sexual violence or harassment and is seeking support services or needs more information, links to resources and our hotline number can be found in the description. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of their organizations or affiliates. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Real-ationship Goals. We're so glad that you're here. I'm Kyla and I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Ariana and I also use she, her pronouns.
I'm Mónica and I use they, she pronouns.
I'm Elsie and I use she, her pronouns.
And we are bringing you a very special topics episode this week because March is Women's History Month. So we wanted to take a little bit of time to celebrate some of the incredible women and organizations that have existed to uplift women throughout history. So we will each be taking some time to share about special people or organizations with you today. And I got the honor of going first. So I will read from my notes now. But I found and chose Martha W. Stewart, who I previously did not know about. She's really cool. So I will teach you about her now. It is not.
I was like, hold on.
No.
That's what I was looking at. You're like,
Martha Stewart. Maria W. Stewart.
Oh, Maria.
Yeah, Maria W. Stewart.
I definitely.
Yeah, I might have said Martha, but it's Maria W. Stewart. She's considered the first African-American woman to speak in public on political, religious, and racial issues. She advocated for the abolition of slavery, for racial uplift and equality, and just for women's rights in general. She was born in 1803 in Hartford, Connecticut, and was orphaned at 5 years old. She wrote on her early life that she was bound out in a clergyman's family, had the seeds of piety and virtue early sown in my mind, but was deprived of the advantages of education, though my soul thirsted for knowledge. Thought that was really moving. Later in her life, she moved to Boston and married a man named James W. Stewart in 1826. He was a shipping agent and a veteran of the War of 1812. The Stewarts joined the small but vibrant free Black community in Boston's Beacon Hill neighborhood. They attended the African Baptist Church located in the African Meeting House. And David Walker, who was a radical abolitionist, knew both Maria and James and was an influence on Maria's thinking. There wasn't much more info on that. I don't know if he attended church with them or how they really engaged with him. My guess was because it was kind of tucked up with the church stuff that he attended the same church that they did. 3 years into their marriage, James died, which was very sad. I don't think they had any children. Even though he left Maria a significant amount of money in his will, according to one of her friends, Louise C. Hatton, the executors of that will robbed and cheated her out of all of the money, and it left her destitute. So that made me really mad. After her husband's death, Maria merged her faith that was actively deepening. She was leaning on that for strength more and more with public action and became a more active part of the growing abolition movement. In 1931, she delivered a manuscript to the offices of abolitionist William Lord Garrison's new newspaper, The Liberator. That summer, she also published an essay, Religion and the Pure Principles of Morality, the Sure Foundation of Which We Must Build. The success from that piece led to a significant public speaking career, and she gave 4 recorded public lectures between 1832 and 1833. This is the really, really, really cool part. Her speech in 1832 in Franklin Hall was one of the first recorded instances of an American woman of any race speaking in public, which is wild.
Oh my gosh, that sentence is so wild.
I know, right? Women rarely gave public speeches or addresses in the early 1800s, especially in front of mixed gender audiences or promiscuous audiences, as they were called back then. So that speech that she gave was in public and in front of a mixed gender audience and was recorded. The very first ever recording of that happened. Wild.
First recording of a woman Speaking of public, and here we are on this podcast.
Speaking in public.
Wow.
Public audience of one. We got Melissa. On the back.
She was making faces. I was laughing. We were reading her stuff.
Our live studio audience. But in one of her speeches, she said, this is also a really interesting part. How long shall the fair daughters of Africa be compelled to bury their minds and talents beneath a load of iron pots and kettles? Possess the spirit of men, bold and enterprising, fearless and undaunted. Sue for your rights and privileges. You can but die if you make the attempt, and we shall certainly die if you do not. She fearlessly attacked racism, slavery, and colonization in her speeches, calling out each thing in several ways. Her speeches and writing gained great attention and controversy, which is not shocking for the early 1800s. And in 1834, she moved to New York and joined a Black female literary society and began teaching. She spent her later years in the 60s and 70s in Baltimore and in Washington, D.C., working as a matron in the Freedmen's Hospital. In 1878, a new law made Maria W. Stewart eligible to collect a pension from her husband's military service, and she used that pension money to publish a new edition of her speeches and writings in 1879. She died in the Freedmen's Hospital shortly after the publication of her book, and while throughout that process, she asked her old friend William Lloyd Garrison to contribute some words to the new edition. And what he wrote about her was, "Your whole adult life has been devoted to the noble task of educating and elevating your people, sympathizing with them in their affliction and assisting them in their need. And though advanced in years, you are still animated with the spirit of your earlier life in striving to do what in you lies to support the outcast, reclaim the wanderer, and lift up the fallen. Cherishing the same respect for you that I had at the beginning, I remain your friend and well-wisher." And all of my information was sourced from the National Park Service.
Oh, okay.
So they have a whole page on her, so I would absolutely recommend checking it out. Much of what I read is directly from that website. That's Maria W. Stewart. I thought she was really cool.
I definitely thought you said Martha Stewart.
Honestly, I might have. I might have misspoke. But yeah, I thought she was neat.
Okay. Yes, I will go next. I did something different this time. I picked a monumental moment for Women's History Month, which was the women's suffrage / the 19th Amendment. So I will do my little spiel. In July of 1848, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott organized the first women's rights convention in Seneca Falls, New York. The convention produced a list of demands called the Declaration of Sentiments, which modeled the Declaration of Independence. It called for broader educational and professional opportunities for women, the right for married women to control their wages and property, and after this, the women's right to vote became a central issue in the emerging debate for women's right to vote in the U.S. So the first one, the National Women's Suffrage Association, so NWSA, was formed by Elizabeth Stanton and Susan B. Anthony in May of 1869, which started because they opposed the 15th Amendment because it excluded women. In the ratification of the 15th Amendment, the NWSA sent a voting rights petition to the Senate and House of Representatives requesting that suffrage rights be extended to women and women should be granted the privilege of being heard on the floor of Congress. The second national suffrage organization established in 1869 was the American Women's Suffrage American Women's Suffrage Association, which is AWSA, which was founded by Lucy Stone, Julia Ward Howe, and Thomas Wentworth Higginson. This organization focused on getting and gaining access for women to the polls at the state level and the local level. So those are two different organizations. But in 1890, NWSA and AWSA merged into the National American Women's Suffrage Association, which became the largest women's suffrage organization in the country and led much of the struggle for the vote through 1920 when the 19th Amendment was ratified. So on the back, I just wrote some like important facts that just kind of subside to why this
I'm also
movement was
looking at
so
facts. That's why I'm like, go ahead. Sorry.
so important. So tactics used by the suffragists went beyond just doing petitions and memorials to Congress. One of those moments was Susan B. Anthony actually registered and voted in the 1872 election, which she was arrested for knowingly and wrongfully and unlawfully voting for a representative. She was convicted and fined $100, which she told
a fortune back in the day.
she was never going to pay. And then in 1874, the conviction, can't never get that word right, was declared unjust. So she never did pay the $100.
That's probably so much back in the day. Oh my God.
Also, in support of this movement, we had some men supporters as well. So one of those men, Frederick Douglass, which was formerly an enslaved person and leader of the abolitionist movement, was also an advocate for the NWSA. In addition, in an editorial published newspaper, he wrote, "In respect to political rights, there can be no reason in the world for denying to women the elective franchise." So basically saying there's no reason for why women shouldn't be able to vote. And then also another important fact is that the leading number of Black women also started supporting.
I was about to say, that's what I was looking at.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
So there, in connection to that, there was a leading growing number of Black women supporting the National American Women's Suffrage Movement, because also with wanting women to be included in being able to vote, also Black women just had as much force to be included in that because of other issues that they face, such as racism, sexism, and things of that nature. Which leads to my last part is eventually suffragists won the political support necessary for the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It finally passed Congress in 1919 and went to the states for ratification. And in May, the House of Representatives passed it by a vote of 304 to 90. And then 2 weeks later, the Senate approved it 56 to 25.
Because I'm over here looking it up on my phone, because I remember talking about the 19th Amendment sometime last year around, is it International Women's Day? I think it's international. And I was having this conversation about how the 19th Amendment was for women to vote, but a lot of women of color were like slowly, I say slowly, loosely, like trickling in after, because I don't think it necessarily gave them the right to vote. It gave white women the right to vote. And then it says right here, this is from the Atlanta History Center. And then it was talking about, gave guaranteed American women the right to vote. However, this is not the inclusive victory. The right to vote was tied to citizenship. And then it was talking about like Native Americans, also talking about the like Chinese Exclusion Act, all these other things. So, and then it was saying like, while the verbiage of the 19th Amendment made it legal for Black women to vote, other barriers, kind of what you were saying, like poll tax, literary tests, and all these. Yeah, also. So I just wanted to add that to you.
But it just goes into like how long it took 30 years for them to even get it to the Congress to have representatives and for it to even be passed.
And you know what, dear, we were talking about it. Yeah. Okay. My turn? Okay, my turn. I don't have no notes because for this podcast, I am picking one of my best friends who I think so highly of. Her name is Heavenly. I was looking up her official title at her job. She's the Esther's Closet coordinator. Esther's Closet is a program, I think, as of right now, underneath the Syntex African American Chamber of Commerce in Waco. And a little bit about Esther's Closet is I always describe it as like a free thrift store. for work clothes for women who are going or going into a new career, transitioning into a different. They have scrubs, they have dresses, they have if you just need black pants, if you're like gonna be in maybe like a food service, a lot of hospitality, all these different things. They've also been I sit on their advisory board, and they've also been talking a little bit more about like supporting women who want to be truck drivers. Like, what are the getting their CDL license? Man, y'all, people do a lot of business there. Woo. But yes, I want to talk about my friend Heaven Lee, which I think is such a cute name, Heaven Lee, because I just think so highly of her. I'm always wanting to brag on her. I just think it's so wild. I met her at a past position. We were very young. She was like 21, fresh out of college, type of thing, writing grants and like leading all these programs. And I was just like, wow, girl, when I was your age, I was just lollygagging. And I just always think so highly of her. I'm always bragging on her and letting her know, like, truly how much she's doing at such a young age. They recently, like, applied for a grant because it's really she's like the coordinator, so she's like the main one, doing volunteer management, donation sorting, relationship building, and things like that. They recently applied for a grant, and if I'm not mistaken, I think they got it, but don't quote me on that. But I'm just like, wow, like you wrote your first grant kind of like by yourself, and you got it, and it's just I just think she's so inspiring. And yeah, because not only is she just a great professional colleague, she's a great friend, a great sister, a great daughter, a great aunt. Like she's just a great person. So I just wanted to talk about my friend.
It's nice to have someone who is currently engaging in good work right now. Because like a lot of our examples are from like the past, and this is someone who is actively working to change their community right now.
Yeah, and something I did want to add that I forgot to mention was with me being on the advisory board, these like in the last year, we've been doing a lot talking about because we just recently had a rebrand of like our logo and stuff. But also like talking about the mission and the vision and all those type of statements. But something that Kevin is so dedicated to is so often people will think, oh, these are low income, like in a derogatory way, these are low income women getting help. And she makes it her mission to let people know that regardless of socioeconomic status, like these women are very much worthy. And so like she puts on every year. I don't know how many years they've been doing it. It's called a big hat brunch. So it's just like they'll do like a lot of like like a panel, and a lot of like people just get dressed up, wear big hats like at the Kentucky Derby type of hats. And then like she'll always give out like a Client of the Year award, and they talk about like their story, their journey, and things like that. And then not only that, like there's a client that they had who went into hospitality, maybe started off, I don't know, maybe like front desk, but now she's like assistant manager or something like that. And like it's so nice to see her go from like a client of Esther's Closet to like partnership, where like now they partner a lot, like, oh, we're gonna host something at this hotel and things like that. And so it's just so beautiful, and like truly like Kevin and her, like everyone in the Chamber of Commerce, like do so much for the community, because that's just like one program that they have at the Chamber of Commerce, right? But yes, my friend is out here changing the world, y'all. I love her.
Okay, mine is going back in history a little bit, not as far. But I chose Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's apparently her full name is Joan Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but she changed it when she was in kindergarten because there was, well, didn't change it, but outside of her family, she went by Ruth because there was too many Jones in her class. But she was born March 15th, 1933. She was, I think I wrote that down right. She was the second woman to serve on the Supreme Court. Second and third, I think. Now I'm second guessing it. But anyways, So a little bit about her backstory. She went to Cornell University for undergrad. She met her husband there. They got married 9 days after she graduated. And then they both went to Harvard Law School. And she was the first woman on the editorial staff at the Harvard Law Review. And this was while she was acting as a caregiver to her husband, who had testicular cancer, and her daughter. And then she ended up transferring to Columbia for the rest of law school, graduated from Columbia. And then after her graduation, she couldn't get a job because she was a woman who had a child. I think at that point, her husband had, what's it called when you're done with cancer? Remission.
Remission.
So I think that his cancer was in remission at that point, and so he was working at a law firm in New York City. And so she was going to like a whole bunch of different law firms and just couldn't get a job. So then one of her professors from Columbia kind of lobbied for her to get a clerkship under one of these judges, and she worked there for 2 years. And then she was able to teach at Rutgers. She taught some law class that I didn't write down and can't remember the name. But and so when she was applying for that job, like during the interview or whatever phase, she got told that since her husband worked at like a big time law firm, that her salary was going to be lower than everybody else's because she already had the extra income from him. So she didn't need an actual salary to herself. And then
also this.
Yeah, what?
And then also when she got pregnant with her second child, she started wearing like very oversized clothes so that she could hide it because she was scared that since she was pregnant, they weren't going to renew her contract. But it was, and she became like the first tenured professor there. And then in 1970 is when she was like started getting really involved in gender equality because she was asked to lead a panel at Rutgers. And so there she got to like talk with different students and stuff about gender equality. And then she was like, I actually really care about this, and this is going to be my life now. And so then her husband brought home a case where it was a gender discrimination case, but it was on a man because at that point in time, only women would be seen as caregivers. And so this man had, I want to say it was his mom, but he was the sole caregiver for his mom. And when his mom passed away, he was supposed to get like a tax deduction because he was a farmer and he had spent so much time taking care of his mom that he was unable to do other things on the farm. And so at that point, I don't know if it's still a thing, but like caregivers get a tax deduction for that. And they were refusing to give him his tax deduction because he actually wasn't a caregiver because he was a farmer. Basically like gender norms on job roles and stuff. But I actually didn't write down the verdict of that case. I don't know whether or not they got it. I'm assuming so, but check me.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, you know what they say about assumptions. So, but in 1972, Ruth was the founding counsel of ACLU's Women's Rights Project. And she also co-authored a law school casebook on gender discrimination. Apologies earlier. I said that she was the first tenured woman at Rutgers, and that was incorrect. It was at Columbia Law School. And while she was a professor, she also did some lawyering. Is that?
She also practiced law?
Yes, that.
Loitering. Loitering. No, I'm just kidding.
But so she argued before the Supreme Court 6 times. She ended up winning 5 of those.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And then in 1980, she was nominated and appointed at the U.S. Court of Appeals. And she stayed there for 13 years until she was nominated and appointed on the Supreme Court, which according to my source, it was a very like easy transition, and they didn't find anything during her like interviews. They're called something special for Supreme Court, but yeah. And throughout all of that, she stayed very vocal on gender discrimination cases, and yeah, and just kind of people that, especially about Roe v. Wade, she was very vocal on that, and whether it be like during the cases or in the reviews. But yeah, I just think that she's a really cool person, and it will tie into my recommendation later.
Perfect, which we will return to very shortly after a brief interlude with our relationship goal for Mónica.
Yes, my relationship goal is really to learn from the women in your life, whether that's older sisters, even younger sisters, aunts, moms, great grandmas. Oh, I completely skipped over grandmas. But yeah, I feel like it's important to learn history, what they went through, how it relates to you. Because I mean, I'm pretty sure y'all have gone through similar things. A lot of human experiences are not unique. So yeah, just kind of learning about them and hearing their stories.
Okay, so my recommendation is to watch On the Basis of Sex, which is the movie about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I personally thought that it was really cool because it like highlighted how her and her husband's relationships had those power dynamics of like he was just not just, it's obviously hard to be a lawyer, but like he was a lawyer and she ended up becoming a judge on the Supreme Court, and also talking about how she had to be his caregiver and like kind of what he was going through at that point in his life, because like he was supposed to be the provider, but she was providing and caregiving and doing all of the things. And so I think that they did a really good job like explaining that aspect of what the social norms said that they were supposed to be doing and what actually worked for their relationship. And also just like how supportive he was of her when she couldn't get a job and all this stuff, and like how she replied when he said that you know, like maybe you should try something else, and she was like, I'm not doing anything else. But anyways, obviously I am not an actress, so I highly suggest watching the movie. But yeah, I don't love all of the cast situation, but do your own research on that and
Own opinions.
yeah, and just take away the main points of the movie, because those were good.
Movie itself.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's all from us for this week, but we will be back not next week, but the week after with another community partner spotlight. But in the meantime, if you're wanting more prevention content, you can find us on Instagram at ACCVC_prevention. And if you want to keep up with everything that the Advocacy Center is doing, you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Advocacy Waco. But we'll see you later. Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Real-ationship Goals. This episode was produced by the Prevention and Education Department of the Advocacy Center for Crime Victims and Children in Waco, Texas. Interested in more content from P&E or the Advocacy Center? You can follow us on Instagram at ACCVC_prevention or on Instagram and Facebook at Advocacy Waco. Be sure to like this episode and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. Bye.